Hello everyone and welcome to my latest Rust Quickie. In my last Rust Quickie I have talked about arrays, and today I want to continue that discussion by talking about vectors in Rust. As I have already said, a vector is always dynamically allocated on the heap in Rust, and therefore you are able to add and remove elements in a vector at a later point in time. So let's switch over to Visual Studio Code, where I want to show you more about vectors. Let's have a look now how you can work with vectors in Rust. As you can see, I'm defining here the initial contents of a vector with the vector macro, and again you are providing the initial values of that vector in square brackets. I'm defining here again a vector of string values, so the strings of SQL Server, Oracle and Access, and that vector is stored or binded to the variable databases. And because we want to change the content of that vector at a later point in time, I have also defined that variable as mutable. In my previous Rust Quickie we have talked about arrays, and here you have learned that an array is always static in Rust, so you can't change the elements of that array at a later point in time. Here with vectors the story is completely different, because the vector is always dynamically allocated on the heap, so it just consumes heap memory, and therefore you have the possibility to add elements to that vector and to remove elements from that vector at a later point in time. So a vector can grow and shrink dynamically during the runtime. So this is a huge difference in comparison to arrays that we have covered last week. With the function push, you can add a new element at the very end to that vector. So in that case, we are adding the string MySQL at the end of that vector, so after the element access. With remove, you can remove at a specific index an element from a vector. I've specified here the index 1, so SQL Server would be index 0, Oracle would be index 1, and therefore we are removing here the string Oracle from that vector. With the function insert, you can insert a new value into that vector at a specific index. So at index 1 we are inserting the string PostgreSQL. You already know the function sort from my previous quickie, where we have talked about arrays, so we are just pre-sorting the whole vector. And with the function pop, you can also remove the last element from that vector. So more or less a vector is just dynamically growing and shrinking, and that's the reason why a vector is always allocated on the heap, because on the heap it can grow and shrink dynamically. And then in a for loop, I'm just printing out the individual values from that vector. So let's run that with a cargo1 command. And as you can see, the final 3 database strings in that vector that we have pre-sorted are access, MySQL, and PostgreSQL. You can see here another definition of a vector. I'm defining here a vector of 8-bit integer values, and I'm defining here a so-called iterator, and that iterator produces the digits 0 to 9. And that iterator is transformed with the collect function into a so-called collection, and that collection is assigned to that vector. As you can see, the name of that variable is digits, and I have also defined that variable as mutable, means we can change that variable at a later point in time. This is necessary because I'm calling here the reverse function, so we are just reversing those digits, and afterwards we are printing those digits in a for loop out to the console. So let's run that command again, and as you can see, we have here the digits 9 to 0 in a reverse order. So this is just a different syntax how you can define a vector without the use of the vector macro. In this Rust Quickie, I have introduced vectors to you, and as you have seen, vectors are always allocated on the heap, and therefore vectors can dynamically grow and shrink accordingly, means you are able to add and remove elements from a vector at a later point in time. In my next quickie, I will talk about so-called slices in Rust, which are also very interesting. So thanks for watching my Rust Quickie today, and I'm already looking forward to see you again next week. Thank you.